And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As today, your Indiana Hoosiers go up to Iowa City and defeat the Iowa Hawkeyes 84-82 in a game that saw Iowa jump out to a huge early lead. I think it was 23-10 at one point. They made their first 10-11 shots. Another Big Ten game where the Hoosiers just came out flat. But unlike some of those other games, Indiana battled their way back, got themselves a 13-point lead in the second half before Iowa came back and had it down to one possession. They miss, and so Indiana escapes with an 84-82 win on what was certainly one of the most memorable games in Robert Johnson's career at Indiana, and we are going to break it all down for you here on the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am your host, Jared Morris. I am here with Ryan Phillips, and no, Andy Bottoms isn't here. Could Andy have picked a worse game to have to miss on a Saturday afternoon than this one? I mean, obviously he's with his family. We get it. But on the day when Robert Johnson goes for 9 3-pointers.
He's with his family, but he's missing out on his family, the Robert Johnson family.
I know. Well, we will have to do our best in Andy's stead to celebrate what was a great day for Robert Johnson. And heck, let's kick that off with the banner moment, because what else could you pick for the banner moment but with the score 79-78 with about 3 minutes to go? Tyler Cook had just missed the back end of a 1-and-1, I think, or maybe it was 2 shots. So it's a 1-point lead for Indiana. And this was after, again, Indiana had a 13-point lead, and Iowa whittled it down really quickly. And the way that Indiana built that big lead was Robert Johnson hitting his 6th, 7th, and 8th three-pointers of the game in a span of just a couple of minutes. And so Indiana comes down. They're clinging to this 1-point lead. The offense had been kind of struggling a little bit. And what happens? Robert Johnson drains another three-pointer to tie the Indiana school record of 9 three-pointers in one game. It was just a huge day for Robert, who finishes with 29 points, 9 of 12 from downtown. And on a day when Indiana did not get a vintage performance from Juwan Morgan, he really struggled. They needed someone else to step up and provide offense, because certainly, the defense wasn't locking Iowa up enough to where Indiana was going to be able to win with the normal amount of points that they score. And Robert Johnson was the guy who stepped up. Again, 29 points. And that three-pointer was just absolutely huge to take it from a 1-point lead, push it out to 4, and obviously it was a big part of the reason why Indiana was able to win the game. We'll have much more coming on Robert Johnson's great day and some of the other strong performances turned in by other Hoosiers not named Juwan Morgan that allowed Indiana to get this win, and we'll be talking about all of that here as we move through the show. Our banner moment, as always, brought to you by our friends at Hoosier Proud, an Indiana-based t-shirt and apparel company that is by Hoosiers and for Hoosiers. And if you're wondering why you should check out their website, HoosierProud.com, and why you should consider buying some stuff from HoosierProud.com, let me give you a few reasons. And I'll switch it up here. The first reason I'm going to talk about today is the philanthropy. When you go to HoosierProud.com and when you purchase T-shirts from Hoosier Proud, you're supporting Indiana-based charities. And if you want to know what charities you support, just go to their website, because they have them listed right there. But let's not understate the importance of reason number 2, which is the designs. I mean, that's why you go to an apparel company's website. That's why you buy T-shirts, is because they have cool designs. And Hoosier Proud has great designs, from the Assembly Call T-shirts that they sell there to the officially licensed IU gear that they have. And, of course, their flagship products, which they really made a name for when they came out, the unique Indiana-inspired designs that feature really interesting elements from the Hoosier State. All of those available at HoosierProud.com. And the third reason, you save money. Use the promo code ASSEMBLY when you're at checkout, when you have all of your items in your shopping cart, and you will get 15% off all of your items, not just one item, not just the Assembly Call T-shirts, but all the items in your shopping cart, 15% off with the promo code ASSEMBLY. Check them out at HoosierProud.com. All right, well, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. It's just me and Ryan today. So, Ryan, that means it's over to you for your opening rant brought to us by thebiglead.com.
Well, first of all, I have long said that Dan Dockich as a broadcaster annoys me, but he's very smart. As far as knowing basketball, because right now Michigan State is ahead by exactly 4 points on Northwestern after coming back from 25 down. And at the beginning of the second half, he said that Michigan State was going to win that game by 4. So Dan Dockich, who's a big fan of this show, is I'll give him credit for that. But no, what I have to say, I think that Indiana really struggled at times today. Again, early start, as I've always not been a fan of those, especially when you're on the road. Iowa came out, jumped on them early. And then late, I thought Indiana really struggled. I mean, really struggled trying to stop Iowa. And I thought the offense got real stagnant after they were up by about 13, as you said, 10 or 13 points. But again, they just found a way to win, and the offense ran very smoothly late. And it's really funny to look how staggering the difference is between late clock situations under Archie Miller and the past regime. And you also look at late game defense and Indiana, if you take out that insane Iowa start, Indiana held Iowa probably around where you would expect. Probably would have been in the high 60s if you take out that ridiculous hot start. Iowa finished with 82. But what I loved too late is they put the ball in the hands of Devonte Green, Robert Johnson, and let him make plays. And Devonte Green he had one late turnover that was his only turnover of the game, and then he came back on the next possession, threw an incredible pass to Freddie McSwain for what ended up being the clinching bucket. Just
that pass was amazing.
Just a wraparound pass with a lot of topspin on it, so it sort of bounced into McSwain instead of just bouncing straight. And McSwain wasn't open when he threw the pass. It was like a quarterback, throwing as his guy comes out of his break. He just knew he was going to be there. He trusted McSwain to gather and finish, and he did. And that was, I thought, the play of the game. Robert Johnson obviously had a great game, but I thought that pass from Devonte Green and the way Devonte Green played early too to help stem the tide of that Iowa run early really was key to this game. He finished with 18 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists, a steal, and only 1 turnover, and was 7 of 10 from the field and 4 of 5 from 3. You saw sort of a hiccup in his last game, but I thought this was more of the Devonte Green we've been seeing lately, and I thought he was fantastic.
Yeah, no question about it. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris. I'm here with Ryan Phillips, and we were breaking down Indiana's 84-82 victory over Iowa, which takes the Hoosiers to 16-12 overall this season. So guarantees that Indiana will finish above 500 for the season. It puts Indiana at 9-7 in conference play with 2 really important games now down the stretch: at Nebraska, home against Ohio State. And for a team that, really doesn't have any wins of note on its resume, these are going to be 2 big opportunities for Indiana to get those. And so, the Hoosiers now have won 4 games in a row. This was a really important win to get leading into these final 2 games, because just it sets the stage for those to mean even more. And Brian, look, I think there are a lot of individual performances that we can talk about from a positive perspective. You mentioned Devonte, Robert Johnson, obviously. I thought Justin Smith really, really played well, and I want to talk about him at the top of the next segment. But I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Juwan Morgan, because he's been a guy that, you just count on him. He's just been so consistent this year. And I thought today was probably one of his worst performances of the season. And I'm curious what you thought watching him, because something just kind of seemed a little off about him the entire day. It's not like the numbers are horrible. He did finish with 12 points on 5 of 9 shooting, but, only 2 rebounds. I thought Tyler Cook absolutely abused him down low. And, another good point Dockich made there at the end of the game, foul trouble doesn't prevent you from boxing a guy out. And Juwan just didn't have quite the same ferocity, as a rebounder. Didn't seem to have quite the same focus offensively. One of Indiana's worst possessions late, he just kind of drove down the lane and threw a shot up. It's almost like he was hoping to get fouled.
Hit the other side of the basket.
And never really had a chance. And, there was a play, probably his best play was an and one that he had late. And he, afterwards, he looked really frustrated. Devonte Green kind of tried to settle him down. And so, who knows? That's the thing you never know about guys is, they could have something going on in their personal lives that has them frustrated, or maybe foul trouble had him frustrated. But whatever it was, he just didn't seem like himself today. Do you think that was kind of game flow, how Iowa frustrated him early, or something else going on there with you?
Well, he had to sit a significant portion of the first half with foul trouble, and I think that probably got him a little bit out of his rhythm.
But he's bounced back from that before.
I know. But, early game on the road, late in the season, I just thought he looked a little flat-footed today, and especially after he came back in. He had some nice plays from time to time, but I think he was also frustrated with Iowa's length and size inside. And you kept hearing Dockich talk about how, he can't shoot over Iowa. He'd have to shoot around him. And he's been doing that all year, but I thought today was particularly interesting. I thought he was definitely frustrated with some of the calls that were called on him and or not called when he was on offense. You could just see that, from the way he was physically, reacting to things. And so I think that that probably had a lot to do. I think it was just a confluence of a lot of things. And again, it's late in the season, a guy who's been carrying this team on his back all year and hasn't, what would be a quote off game. He also had 3 turnovers. I mean, very not like Juwan Morgan, but I just think that all of it, sort of mounted up and showed him having a pretty down game, especially, considering the first time they played Iowa, he was dominant playing in the middle of that zone, and just catching the ball and kicking it out or driving or whatever. And you really didn't see that today. So I would say that I think it was just a combination of a lot of things. And you look at the numbers and you're not having Juwan Morgan and Freddie McSwain having their typical rebounding days, and Indiana got murdered on the glass. So that is not something we expect to see. It's not something we've seen often, but Cook alone had 5 offensive rebounds and he had 10, he finished with 10, and Iowa, 33-19 on the rebounding advantage. That's not something you look for if you're Indiana. So I do think that there was just a lot of things that probably worked up to frustrate him a bit.
And given all of that, I think is why this win is so impressive. Because look, there are a lot of negatives, and I think when Archie Miller and the staff goes back to watch this, I mean, obviously the way Indiana started, it wasn't good.
There's plenty of tape.
Yeah, I mean, the stretch that you mentioned there in the second half after Indiana had built their own 13-point lead, that wasn't good. But this, to me, the way that Indiana was actually able to win this game, I think, is a sign of growth for the program, because you're not going to come out every single game and have your A game, and even a team that's built on defense and that has played defense as well as Indiana, just because you're built on defense, it doesn't mean that you come out with that same defensive energy and focus and kind of vitality every game. Sometimes you come out a little bit flat and the other team punches you in the mouth like Iowa did, making their first 10 shots. So I was really impressed with how Indiana came back in the first half, and it didn't take like a 15-0 run. Because in the past, I feel like for Indiana to come back in a game like this, the offense would have just had to go nuts and really pull them back. And that's not really what happened. Indiana, over the final 12 minutes of the first half, just kind of systematically whittled away at the lead to get it down to 3 at halftime. And they did it by playing better defense, stringing together some stops, and being smart offensively. And so despite some of the struggles, and I think, despite some of the issues rebounding, there was a mental toughness on behalf of the entire roster today that was able to deal with some challenges on the road and take a pretty good punch from a team that's been struggling and still come out on top. And so I think even with all the warts of this game, I think there's something to grasp onto to say, this is the type of win I don't think we would have gotten maybe even 6-7 weeks ago, let alone last year. And now we got it. And that's important, because it's important in the Big Ten, especially on the road, to be able to win sometimes when you've got your B- game. And I thought that's about what Indiana played defensively today against, albeit a good offensive team, and they still were able to grind out a victory. And that, to me, is impressive.
Yeah, no, and I think also you have to look at it as you said, you don't have your best stuff. It's like a major league pitcher who doesn't have his best stuff on that day, just kind of grinding it out and finding ways to get guys out. And with locate, if you don't have your velocity, you use location and you just be smarter than the other team. And I thought this, especially for about the first 10 minutes of the second half, Indiana was the far smarter team, and they got the ball to the guys who were making plays. They got the ball to Robert Johnson. They got it to Devonte Green. They let them create, spread out Iowa's defense. And then defensively, they just didn't let anybody get past them, make them shoot jump shots, make them, shoot from areas they don't want to shoot from, help out on the post, make them shoot threes. I thought that they just played smarter. And that's not something we've said about Indiana basketball in a long time. They just played smarter than their opponent and wore them down. And then late, again, there was about a 5-minute stretch there where Indiana did not play well. But, and we've said this before, it's if you finish well, all memories of playing badly are go out the window. And those last few possessions, Indiana knuckled down and played really well, despite being in foul trouble, despite having Justin Smith, who had, as you said, had a great game. Out of the game, they really knuckled down and played well. So,
and it's also worth mentioning, Indiana did end up going 14 of 24 from 3-point range. So you don't win this game if you don't have one of your best shooting days. But
I was going to say, what have we been saying about this team all year? If they just hit a couple threes, they'd win a lot more games, right? Isn't that what we
I believe that has been mentioned.
That has been mentioned,
stating the obvious, but it's been mentioned.
Yeah, I think that's been mentioned a few. But no, I mean, some of these games you hit one more 3-pointer and you win. I mean, one or two more 3-pointers and you win, and you see what happens and what a dangerous weapon the 3-point shot is. You don't want to rely on it, but what a dangerous weapon that is, and how many mistakes that can make up for. I mean, essentially, they were 14 and 24 from three, and that more than made up for Iowa's entire first half. If you look at that, where Iowa for about the first 10 minutes was on fire, you can cut that down just by hitting a couple threes. So it really is a dangerous weapon. It's why I think people have really wanted to see this team shoot better from the outside.
Yep. All righty. Coming up on the assembly call, I will point out today's meaningful moment that you might have missed, and then we will go inside the numbers as we continue to break down Indiana's 84-82 victory over Iowa. That is next here on the assembly call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris. I'm here with Ryan Phillips, and we are breaking down Indiana's 2-point victory over the Iowa Hawkeyes today that brought the Hoosiers up to 9-7 in conference play. And it is time now for today's meaningful moment that you might have missed. And for this meaningful moment, I want to take you back into the second half. And it was a really great sequence by Justin Smith. And I thought Justin Smith, he got himself into foul trouble. And so he was only able to play 20 minutes, but he finishes the game with 15 points, 5 of 7 from the field. And I thought probably, for a stretch in the second half, played the best defense that anybody played on Tyler Cook, even better than Juwan Morgan. And look, no one really played great defense on Tyler Cook because he had a great day.
Yeah, I thought
besides Freddie at the end. Yes, besides
Freddie at the end.
And we need to mention that too. But there was a sequence in the second half. Like I think one of the main reasons that Justin hasn't been getting more minutes here late in the season is his struggles on defense. And I thought he had probably his best defensive sequence of the season in that stretch in the second half. And, look, he struggled to defend some ball screens. I thought he did a great job in this one possession, popping out, defending a ball screen, and then recovering all the way back to get a steal on Tyler Cook. Then he runs the floor, gets a pass from Devonte Green, gets fouled, makes one of the 2 free throws. That gave Indiana their first lead of the game at 53-52. On the next drive, then, Cook tried to drive in on Smith. He bodied him up, forced a pass without fouling. Again, not a play that's going to, show up on the highlight films. But some of those small things defensively are what have really kept Justin from getting more minutes. And I think today he would have played a lot more minutes if he hadn't been in foul trouble. But I think, after what he did in Indiana's last game and then today, we are really seeing the growth in Justin Smith. And he's really becoming a more consistent contributor now for this team. And so, we've seen the growth in him being able to finish through contact and get fouled and get to the line more and be able to be a more effective scorer. If he can now combine that with better defense, which at least today for a portion of the game, he showed, that's important. And I'll tell you the other thing that I like about Justin Smith is, he got dunked on. I think it was back in the first half. He got dunked on by Tyler Cook, or not dunked on. He got blocked, that great two-handed block that Cook had. And from that point on, for about the next 10 minutes, Justin Smith basically dominated the game because he came down Indiana's next 2 possessions, had a couple of dunks, had that great defensive sequence that I talked about in the second half. He was really, really good. And so for a freshman to take that and not go into a shell, but come right back out after that and play some of the best basketball of the season, I was impressed with his mental toughness as well. So he's got to cut down on the fouls, but I saw a lot today from Justin Smith to be really pleased about, and that's the second straight game he's done that.
What I loved was that he had that putback dunk like right after that. And then he had a little dunk where he drove along the side and just for no reason at all went with a reverse and hammered it down.
That was a great pass by Hartman too. It dove from the short corner and it was a great pass.
And I will say about Collin Hartman, while he didn't score today and had some raggedy moments, he played pretty good defense and also had 5 assists, which I don't think.
He was one of the reasons we stayed afloat in the first half. Because they put him in the middle of the zone and he kind of solidified things.
And they started moving the ball a lot better when he was in there. But it's one of those things where at first glance you think, oh, I didn't really see Collin Hartman doing much today, but he really did have a nice game despite not being able to shoot, hit any shots. But yeah, I would say I loved that about Justin Smith, that he just came right back, because a lot of freshmen will go into a shell after something like that. And it's embarrassing or
try to do too much, but he came back, but played within himself.
And your family's watching, your girlfriend's watching, and you just got completely, hammered by a block. And he came back down and really showed himself. And he, 5 of 7 from the free throw line today, which is better than most players on this team are doing. So, by the way, also Indiana only shot 9 free throws today, where Iowa shot 22. But hey, we won't get into that. No. But no, I really loved what I saw from Justin Smith today, and I think that it's, again, every time you see him step up, you get really excited, not just about the way he's playing, but about where he's going to be in a year, and how much a full offseason will do for him to get him to that next level.
So you alluded to the other moment that I wanted to point out, and this was a rough day for Freddie McSwain, defensively. He didn't start out very well. We mentioned he struggled on the glass more than he has. But you talk about a guy who delivered a couple of clutch defensive possessions when Indiana really needed him. 82-82, Iowa has the ball. And this, I mentioned in the banner moment, Robert Johnson's 3 put Indiana up 82-78. Well, Iowa goes on a quick 4-0 run to tie it up. They've got the ball. And Tyler Cook, who had basically been doing whatever he wanted to do, takes it on Freddie. And Freddie just played such smart defense, forcing him to the baseline. And because Freddie kind of beat him to the spot and was a little bit quicker and played with his feet instead of his body, he forced Cook to step out of bounds. And you don't always see some of those defensive subtleties from Freddie, but I thought his positioning on that possession was so great. And then the next possession down is where, he makes the cut. And obviously, Devonte Green couldn't have thrown a more perfect pass. But Freddie, not a guy who's always been great at being on the move, catching a ball, and then laying it in, even when he's wide open.
All in one motion,
yes.
Too,
And to his credit, in one of the biggest moments of the season for him, he was able to do it, and then goes down on the next possession, has another terrific defensive possession, forces a miss. Indiana ends up getting a rebound. So that, whatever it was, 30, 45-second stretch from Freddie McSwain at the end of the game, if he doesn't do that, Indiana might not win this game. And so another guy who, despite some struggles, was there at the end for Indiana, showing that kind of mental toughness and resolve, not just on the offensive end, but getting it done on defense and having defense lead to offense, which is the difference for this year's team. And, obviously you're now the president of the Freddie McSwain fan club, so I'll let you gush all over that sequence, but it was some terrific defense by Freddie.
That's Bottoms' thing. Let's not go that far. No, I think it was just an impressive performance from Freddie on that last play. And what he did was he just didn't let himself get beaten. He didn't do anything special. He just didn't let himself get beaten. And a lot of times the way you get beaten is by trying to do too much and step up and be too aggressive with the guy. And he just kind of held his ground, made Cook make a move on him and react to that move, as opposed to overreacting or underreacting to that move. He just reacted the way he was supposed to, forced Cook out of bounds, and was just... It was smart, as opposed, again, Indiana just played smarter, I think, in the key moments than Iowa did. And it was just a smart possession by Freddie instead of trying to do too much. And we've seen Freddie try and do too much at times this year. But lately, what has really been great about him is that he's just doing what he can. He's finishing around the hoop. He's, when he gets a chance, he's making his free throws for the most part. And he's also rebounding. And those are the things he does well. And I thought today he just, they couldn't put Morgan on Cook because Morgan had 4 fouls. And so McSwain had to step up, and he did on that possession and played very well on that last stretch. So I got to give him credit for stepping up today, especially because he wasn't that involved in the game throughout. And then he was able to step up and make a big play when needed.
Yep. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Ryan Phillips, breaking down Indiana's thrilling 84-82 victory over Iowa today. Ryan, it's time to go inside the numbers. And
my favorite.
Well, yeah, I know. Where's Andy when you need him?
I know.
Look, if you watched the beginning of that game and you saw Iowa, did they make their first 10 or 11 shots?
10, I believe.
It was insane. So here's a crazy number for you. Guess who finished in the lead in field goal percentage for the game? Indiana. Indiana shoots 56% for the game. Iowa shoots 55% for the game. And look, obviously no team is going to be able to maintain that kind of shooting. But part of it was, at that point, Iowa was basically getting any shot that they wanted. And so when you're comfortable getting the shots that you want out of your offense, you're much more likely to make them and go on a big run. For the rest of the game, outside of a few stretches, Indiana made it a lot harder on Iowa. And so it's no coincidence that they started shooting, they were less hot. They started, the shooting lessened because they weren't getting exactly the shot that they wanted. And that's the kind of defense that Indiana has been playing. And so I think that number right there is a testament to, Indiana's ability to refocus on defense and not just let the game totally get away from them and just chalk it up to a day where they just weren't going to do it on the defensive end. Archie wouldn't allow that, and then the players wouldn't allow that, and they got back into it. And it's obviously a testament to Indiana's own ridiculously hot shooting and going 14 of 24 from downtown. This was a night where actually, usually Indiana's field goal percentage is driven by 2-point field goal percentage as opposed to 3-point shooting.
Yeah.
Well, in this game, Iowa is the 8th tallest team in the country. And so while they aren't good defensively, they're at 230th or something defensively. Because of their height, they presented a challenge for Indiana to where you were going to be able to get shots and score, but you might not be able to do it the way you normally want to do it. Because ironically, Indiana, a smaller team, it still does most of its work in the paint. A guy like Juwan Morgan, is a big driver of that high 2-point field goal percentage. Well, today Indiana showed that they have some more tricks in their bag. And if Robert Johnson and Devonte Green can keep shooting like this, obviously it makes everything better. So that flip of the 3-point percentage driving the strong field goal percentage instead of the 2-point percentage, I thought was impressive. And then the other thing is Indiana won the turnover battle today. Indiana had 10 turnovers. Iowa had 17. And again, Iowa, not a good defensive team, but for the most part, Indiana, outside of a few passes against the zone where they tried to make bounce passes and really, I almost thought some of those were more the fault of the guy that the pass was going to, being unable to handle it. They avoided some of the really bad turnovers, and in a one-possession game, that makes all the difference. So to me, those are some of the numbers that jump out. Also, 23 assists on 32 made field goals is really big, and you're going to get that when you're making a lot of open three-pointers. What jumps out to you from the stat sheet?
I was going to say the assists. I thought it showed that really with about 10 minutes left to go in the first half, and then up until about 5 minutes left in the second half, Indiana really moved the ball well. And it wasn't just passing around the outside of the zone, and you could tell when the offense was running well and when it wasn't. They were going through that high guy at the free throw line in the zone and get it there, move it, because then you got to get the defense to react. If you're just passing around the outside of the zone, that's exactly what the zone wants. So I also think that Iowa was 19 of 22 from the free throw line, Indiana 6 of 9. To make up a 13-point difference at the free throw line just through better offense that's a huge deal. You're at a 13-point deficit there.
15-point difference in 3-point shooting helped compensate for that.
That really did. And I thought they defended the three well too. I didn't think Iowa got a whole lot of open looks. But I think that the assist number, the free throw totals, making up for that difference. And then, 7 steals for Indiana also. I thought they were really active in passing lanes. Even if it wasn't, you'd see a lot of times it wasn't the guy whose man was passing the ball. It was a guy somewhere else would get a hand on a ball, a deflection, as you might say, and the ball would come loose and somebody else would grab it. So I thought that was really impressive too. The one area I'll point out as a negative again is the rebounding. 33-19, Iowa crushed Indiana on the glass. Again, a much bigger team, but you can't give up 10 offensive rebounds. You just can't. And so I think that, especially against a team like Iowa, who's not that great, you're giving them second chance opportunities. You're giving a guy, like Tyler Cook a second chance. You can't do that because he's good enough with his first chance. And when you're giving him extra ones, you're only gonna suffer for that. So overall, the numbers pretty much bear out what happened. But I think that there are certainly areas that Indiana's going to look at on film this week and be upset about. But the most important number from this game, 16-12. That's Indiana's record now. 9-7 is the other one 9 and what are we now? Are we 9-7? 9-7 in the Big Ten. We clinched 500. That's a big deal considering where this team was a couple weeks ago.
Clinched at least 500.
Right. And so I think those are important things. They came away with a road win. Obviously, if you lose to Iowa, you're probably not going to wind up in the postseason. I think we all knew that, but 16-12 looks a whole lot better than 15-13.
The other number that really jumps out to me is the blocks and steal numbers from Juwan Morgan and Zach McRoberts. 0. And so much of what Indiana has done defensively this year has been driven by those two guys. And I thought today, they didn't quite have, what they usually bring. And Juwan especially. I mean, he's a guy that gets a lot of steals, a lot of blocks, gets a lot of rebounds. He only had 2. And yeah, a lot of times, I mean, you have to be a good athlete to get blocks at this level. And Juwan is a sneaky good athlete, but he's also just active and he's aware and he's attentive. And I think when you see him put up a goose egg in those numbers, that's just another suggestion that something was off. And so, hopefully this is just kind of a 1-game aberration for him and he puts it behind him and comes out in the next game. But yet again, when you count on 2 guys like Juwan Morgan and Zach McRoberts to get you those, kind of game-changing plays, Zach McRoberts is first in the conference in steal rate. He doesn't get any steals in 24 minutes. So when you have come to count on that and you don't get it, you have to get contributions in other areas that are unexpected. Obviously, the 3-point shooting was big. And then, the performance turned in by Justin Smith was big. And so a really big just team victory for Indiana, where guys you normally count on don't step up, other guys step up more. Collin Hartman comes in and gets those 5 assists. So impressive for a team where it was absolutely horrifying, even fathoming long stretches of the game with Juwan Morgan out. This was a game on the road where Indiana actually played better with Juwan Morgan on the bench. And so that's not sustainable moving forward. But in a 1-game situation, sometimes you have to do that and still find a way to win. And that's why, again, another reason why I think today was a really impressive victory for Indiana, even though the opponent, isn't going to, necessarily show up on the resume or be one that's huge.
I'll tell you what, though, about Iowa is they've not been good this year. They're talented. I honestly think their coaching kind of holds them down a little bit. I don't think Fran...
Not a fan of Fran?
Not a very big fan of what Fran... I mean, that play he drew up at the end of the game was just horrific. But what I would say is they probably had this game circled for a while, saying that's a game we can get. At home, early start, Indiana, not a great team this year. This is a game we can win. And they started out the game like they were going to win the game, like they knew they were going to win the game. And I mean, kudos to Indiana for standing up to that and quickly shutting that down, that thinking process. I mean, by halftime, it was 45-42. Iowa had been up by 13, I think, at one point, and Indiana had closed that door and really put it in Iowa's mind that, okay, maybe we're not going to win this game. And Iowa played like that for most of the second half, that they weren't going to win it. So,
yep.
I thought it was a nice job of Indiana reacting to what was a pretty tough situation early.
Coming up on the Assembly Call, we continue our breakdown of Indiana's victory over Iowa. We have not spent enough time yet talking about the contributions of Indiana's backcourt, Robert Johnson and Devonte Green. So we got to get into those guys and break down their performance as we move forward. Talk a little bit more about Collin Hartman as well. That is next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game and every Thursday night on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. You can also view all of our live broadcasts right on our homepage at assemblycall.com. I am Jared Morris. I'm here with Ryan Phillips. And Ryan, where are we going to be next week at this time?
We are going to be in
Bloomington. That's right. So I wanted to take a few minutes here just during the postgame show and let you all know, whether you're listening on the podcast, live, or on the radio, that we are making our annual pilgrimage to Bloomington for a game. We will be there for Robert Johnson's senior night. And obviously many other guys' senior nights as well. I know. But look, Robert Johnson has been the guy who's gotten the most airtime on this show during his career. So clearly this, and obviously Andy Bottoms, the president of the Robert Johnson fan club. But we will be in Bloomington for that game. That game is obviously Friday. We're going to be hanging out somewhere in Bloomington, probably Nick, Saturday afternoon. We'll be at the game at the arena early, and then we're going to hang out somewhere after that. So we'll let you know the full details of that. But if you're going to be in town, we'd love to meet you. We'd love to say hi. So let us know. We'll tweet stuff out on our Twitter account. If you're on the email list, I'll let you know on there as well. So we'd love to have you come out, say hi, meet you before, after the game. But just wanted to let you know that we will be in town. So if you're going to be there, let us know so we can shake your hand, say hi, and thank you for being a member of our audience and a member of the Assembly Call community. Ryan, let's talk about the two guards. Robert Johnson, I think for how great he was offensively. And there was a play. Let me get to my notes here and see when this was, because as impressive as his 3-point shooting was, there was a play in the second half Here it was. So Iowa had made it 74-73. And so Indiana clinging, that 13-point lead whittled all the way down to 1. And, Robert hadn't gotten many good looks after hitting that 8 3-pointer because, or the 9th 3-pointer. That was the 8th 3-pointer. The 9th would come later because Iowa actually decided to, start guarding him a little bit tighter. And so he took it. The guy's overplaying him, and he just drives in himself and scores a nice little bucket, down in the paint to make it 76-73. And so it's nice to see him, have the patience, have the awareness to do that. And to be able to do that without to look confident doing it and not kind of panic when he got in the lane like we've seen. And so, 4 assists, only 1 turnover for Robert. That was impressive. And I thought his defense today was outstanding. I mean, especially in the second half, one of the things that Indiana did when they turned their defense around is they made things a little bit harder on Iowa's guards. The passes into the post weren't as easy. They weren't able to dribble and get to the spots they wanted to go to. And Robert, I thought, was playing some really outstanding perimeter defense. So the headliner, obviously, the 3-pointers, and Indiana doesn't win this game without all 9 of his 3-pointers. But overall, I mean, I struggle to think of a lot of games that were more complete games for Robert Johnson than this one. I mean, this very well may have been the best game that he played in Indiana uniform, not just the 3-point shooting, but everything he did today.
Yeah, I thought he played pretty well in Jordan Bohannon, too, for stretches where he was on him. Didn't let him get loose. Obviously, Bohannon hit a couple threes later, but, to finish 3 of 12 and 2 of 10 from 3, he just wasn't getting good looks. And I thought that Johnson and the other perimeter defenders all really turned in solid performances there. But, yeah, Robert, I mean, look, anytime you hit 9 of 12 from 3, and by the way, his shot looked so much better today. And that's, I mean, I know it's,
and he airballed one.
I know, I know it's, well, he made 9 threes. Of course his shot looked better, but no, I mean, the form was better. A couple he did fade away on, that went in, just cause he was, he was unconscious at one point, but no, he was stepping into his shots as opposed to sort of being flat footed, jumping straight up or jumping back, and twisting his whole body as we've seen all year. He was confident. I don't know what happened. But he was super confident on his shot today, and it looked great. And so all credit to him for being, just stepping into those threes instead of just firing them, which I feel like he's done most of the year. He's just kind of launching threes as opposed to confidently stepping up. And so I really liked what I saw from him today on both ends of the floor. I also liked how he picked his spots offensively too.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you start hitting threes, you start just going nuts. And I thought that he picked his spots and was willing to make the extra pass too today when he didn't have a great look, and was able to, instead of just driving straight into the teeth of the defense, like sometimes guys do when they're on fire, he really waited until he had something worth, attacking with. And so give him credit for that. Also, Robert, man, you had a great shooting day. Make your free throw late, buddy. Come on.
I know.
It's like the one way he had a perfect chance to put an exclamation point on it, make those free throws, put himself over 30 points, and he missed the front end. I was just like, oh, Robert.
I know.
He would have, ended the game essentially. But overall, great game for Robert. I would love to see him shoot this confidently down the stretch. I think it would be huge for Indiana if we can get that one guy hitting those threes.
So we've mentioned that Devonte Green had a nice bounce back game tonight. He finishes with 18 points, 6 assists. We've praised him a ton for that pass to Freddie McSwain, which is beautiful. But he had a lot of good passes tonight. Finishes with 6
moved
assists.
The ball well.
I mean, he just, he continues to be the one guy on this team that can really create for other guys. Collin Hartman was able to do some of that because Iowa was playing a zone and because, he's so smart in those situations. But,
right.
Devonte can just create offense where there isn't necessarily offense. And I think, for a guy like Robert Johnson, usually he's got to, get some open shots within the flow of the offense. And when he gets a heavy dose of them like he does today, he can get into a real rhythm. There were a couple times, I mean, that one was back in the first half when Devonte just, took Bohannon off the dribble, had a couple of crossover dribbles and, took him into the lane. I mean, he is easily the only Hoosier who's going to be able to make that play. And so for him to come out, have 6 assists, 1 turnover. So that's 10 assists and 2 turnovers for Indiana's backcourt. I mean, that is a terrific job by the starting backcourt. And I thought, shot selection wise, Devonte was really good today. You know, he's 7 of 10, 4 or 5 from downtown. You mentioned earlier that the 3-pointers that he hit in the first half were really big. I mean, it was almost kind of like the Seton Hall game where nothing was really going offensively in the first half, and Devonte had to kind of keep Indiana in the game. Now, obviously, that Seton Hall game got way out of control. But today, I mean, look, it was important early to just keep it within 10, 13 points because of the run Iowa was on. So those were big threes that he was hitting that then kept Indiana just, within arm's reach when the defense finally, kind of stepped back up and they were ready to make the comeback. So I thought that offense was really big. And look, I think with Devonte, you're looking for signs of maturity. You're looking for signs of a guy who kind of gets it, who can bounce back. And I thought we really saw that today because he didn't play very well in the last game, bounce back. And now it's, you take out the last game and the game against Purdue. I mean, that's what 6 out of the last 8 games have been really good for Devonte. And so I was really impressed with what he was able to do on the road, and he was a real steadying influence for Indiana. That when he was out of the game, Indiana's offense really struggled. That was in part because Josh Newkirk, did not play very well today.
At what point early in the season did you think you would be calling Devonte Green a steadying influence on the team?
And this is, and who would have thought that we would be praising, Freddie McSwain, for defense late, for clutch plays. I mean, that's why you've got to let a season play out because so many things can happen that you don't expect, and I think the maturity of Devonte Green and him really seeming to get it it's one of the most interesting, it's one of the most rewarding, and it's one of the most important storylines from this season.
Yeah. And just maturity, and you're seeing players being developed and playing better. And that definitely happened under the past regime. They developed players very well. But you're also seeing these guys, really step their games up on both ends of the floor. And I felt like a lot with the past regime, you saw guys get a lot better offensively, but you're just seeing defensive intensity out of these guys that we didn't expect and didn't see. I mean, Devonte Green has always talked about wanting to be a great defender, but now we're seeing it on a consistent basis. We would see it in flashes, but now we're seeing it on a consistent basis. You're seeing Justin Smith play really good defense at times. You're seeing Al Durham. I mean, Al Durham only played a few minutes today, but when he was in there, he was good. He had 2 assists, a steal, played solid defense. And you're just seeing it from all these guys across the board really buy into what's being preached, and it's paying off as they've played really well in this last stretch.
Speaking of comments you didn't think that you would see in our chat, I just saw someone say, "Someone find Freddie one more year." I mean, seriously. I mean, that's the kind of performance that he's turned in. By the way, I just saw the KenPom stats update, so we'll talk about those here in just a second. You are listening to the Assembly Call.
By the way, I don't think we've mentioned this. 4 in a row for Indiana. 4 wins in a row for Indiana.
Now we mentioned it, but it's worth mentioning again.
Okay.
And that and this is why now we're in uncharted territory, and this is kind of why I wanted to pump the brakes a little bit with everybody talking about running the table down the stretch, with these 3 games, because Indiana had won 3 in a row before, but they hadn't shown the kind of consistency you need to put a stretch of 4 games together, 5 games together. Well, now we've won 4 in a row, so we're kind of in uncharted territory, which, I think means, hey, we're ready for this challenge to end the season against Nebraska, Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament. We're playing our best basketball of the season. We're winning in different ways. Let's go and let's take our chances. I don't think you really could have thought that we would be in that position 8 weeks ago. But really, I think if you go back and listen to some of our preseason shows, Ryan, the team is kind of right now where we thought they would be by this point. I just don't think we expected so many steps back in the non-conference to where it would seem like they've come so far. You know what I mean? Because, some of those losses. But I mean, I think, we talked about Indiana being, 5th, 6th, 7th best team in the conference, playing their best basketball at the end of the season, being able to take advantage of the schedule opening up at the end of the year. All of those things are happening. It's just been a more circuitous and, overall less successful route to get here than we thought.
Circuitous was on your word of the day calendar, wasn't it?
Yes. So I was committed to getting it in here. By the way, I hope everybody took screenshots of when Indiana was first in the conference in defensive efficiency, because Indiana is now 5th after today's game. They've dropped to 0.992 points per possession as Iowa scored 1.18 points per possession today. I mean, probably bound to happen at some point. Indiana probably wasn't. And look, Indiana did build some of that defensive run against some offenses that were pretty bad. And this Iowa offense is, they're a pretty good offense. Indiana now 59th in the country. But again, to be able to win when you're not playing as good a defense, I thought was impressive. And now I think you got to take that defense back up a notch as you go to Nebraska and then play Ohio State. Let's talk real quick about Collin Hartman because highlights for Collin Hartman have been few and far between. And for a while there, it kind of looked like he might not play again as the injuries just started to pile up. But you talk about guys that Indiana would not have won without today, and you add Collin Hartman to that list. Didn't do a ton in the second half, but the stretch in the first half when he had 4 assists and played some solid defense. And, I shouldn't say he didn't do a ton. He did play some solid defense in the second half. He plays 17 minutes, doesn't make any shots, but I thought we kind of saw some Collin Hartman things today. And we haven't seen a ton of Collin Hartman things since the injuries started to pile up against Wisconsin. And that was great to see. If he can kind of finish out his career being able to come in and give Indiana, 14 to 18 good minutes a game, be a steadying influence, make some good passes, get a little steal here and there like he was today, play smart defense, that's really going to be a big bonus for Indiana to have a guy like that off the bench.
Yeah, Hartman looks like a football player when he's out there with just his knee wrapped, he goes to the bench and his arms getting iced. I mean, it's just, it looks like he's been through a war. And, so whatever he can give you at this point is great, but I don't think you're going to see much from a shooting perspective just because his arm and knee are, those are key. Those are clearly key components to a jump shot. But he did have the 5 assists today, 1 rebound, 2 steals, a block. He was active. And I think that, at this point, you've got to sort of look for the silver linings with him just because he's been so injured and he's been so snake bitten during his career. But I did think he was very active defensively and made some stuff happen. And that's a huge positive.
Any other individuals jump out to you that we haven't really gotten into Newkirk very much? I think other than that, we've really kind of broken down all the notable performances from Hoosiers today. One guy who I do want to call out is Archie Miller. And sometimes we kind of allude to good coaching, through what we say, but we don't always talk about it specifically. And I thought Archie called a good game today. I thought he took some smart timeouts when momentum was getting a little bit away from Indiana. There was a timeout early. I don't remember exactly where it came. And you only saw maybe about a second and a half of it before they cut out. No, I'll tell you when it was. It was early. It was when the horn sounded because there were all kind of issues at Carver Hawkeye Arena today at the beginning of the game. And so the horn sounds and they have to go over and look at it. And there was about a 2 or 3 minute delay. And he called all the guys over. And you could tell that he just lit into them. And I think Archie sensed that the guys were flat, that it was like the Michigan game and like the Ohio State game where they just didn't quite have it. And it felt to me like he just wasn't going to take it today. And you saw some frustration. And I thought, right there, that was an important moment to get the guys together and really get them going. And it didn't change anything right off the bat. But I think what you saw today is the impact of having a coach that has a standard for how hard and how focused you have to play. And it's sinking in and not allowing this to become a 40-minute malaise, but instead, being a game where Indiana was able to recover itself because it has an identity, it was able to rely on that. And then, obviously you needed something special to happen today to win, with the way you started and with the way Juwan Morgan played. And you got that with the 3-point shooting. But I thought Archie made some good decisions, with lineups, with times that he kind of lit into his team that sometimes you have to do, especially in these kind of odd afternoon games on the road in the Big Ten.
Yeah, look, Archie has earned. I mean, I know the record. If you just looked at this season from the outside without actually watching these games, you'd say, well, he's having an okay year, I guess. It's his first year. But you watch the way this team has developed and the way that he has handled these players and sort of developed them, not just overall. We talked about development of getting guys better and getting them to buy in, but I'm talking like game to game in games. I just think that you've got to give him a ton of credit. He is in charge of this team. These guys know it. I think they like him, but there's also an element where they might be a little afraid of him on the way he stalks the sideline and stuff. And there's a benefit to that. I don't mean afraid of him like you're going to abuse a guy or scream at him and belittle him. But I mean, there's a little like, hey, get it together. You're not going to play. And
you can tell from the reactions when he says stuff that they don't necessarily like maybe what's being said in the moment, but it still sinks in.
And it works. That's the other thing. And the key is getting a result. And you've just seen it. I mean, he is in charge on the bench, and you have watching these games and watching the last couple of weeks. If you're an Indiana fan, you have to have confidence in this guy. I mean, it's there. And the other thing is one thing it's a really small thing, but late in games offensively, he's not, a guy who's, his offenses are good, but he's not known as like a super, genius offensively. But late in games, the possessions this team runs now over the last few weeks, they clearly have a plan of what they're going to do, who they're going to go to, who they're not going to go to, and how to get it. And lots of options as well for what's going to happen. And you've seen it, and you've seen it over and over again. And that Devonte Green pass to Freddie McSwain was a perfect example. They knew what was going to be open, and they attacked it. And having a plan, the great quote is that a plan is just a list of things that doesn't happen. But when you have a plan that has several options and different variations in it, and you know where to go with it, and when you're a basketball player, it changes everything. Instead of having some nebulous concepts of, oh no, we're just gonna run a motion offense. No, he has a plan of what he wants, and they attack it and they find it. And over the last few weeks, we've seen it in key situations. This team's coming through.
Absolutely. All right, coming up in our final segment of this edition of the Assembly Call, we hand out our game balls. We look ahead to Indiana's next opponent, and then we deliver our final thoughts on Indiana's 84-82 victory over Iowa in last call. That is next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris. I'm here with Ryan Phillips, and we are wrapping up our breakdown of Indiana's 84-82 victory over Iowa. It's a real shame that Andy Bottoms couldn't be here with us today, although he did text me in the middle of the game and say that he was listening to it and it sounded like Robert Johnson was red hot and he wished he could be on the show. So I'm sure at some point, maybe it'll be, next Thursday for Assembly Call Radio, we will get Andy's reflections on this incredible performance from Robert Johnson. But let's allow that to lead us into our game ball segment. Ryan, you've got a few choices. You could go with Freddie McSwain again. It'd be pretty easy to talk yourself into that with the defense he played late, but you've also got a couple of standout performances from the backcourt to choose from as well. I'm
going with Devonte Green. I think 18 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists. I mean, Devonte Green was their leading rebounder today. I mean, that's a little disconcerting, but a steal, only 1 turnover, and it came very late, and he bounced back from that turnover by making that game-sealing assist to Freddie McSwain. I think Devonte gets my game ball today. And I think it's the first of what are going to be many moving forward. He's really settling into that role as the sort of the playmaker on the perimeter.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's got to be Robert Johnson on what was.
I knew you were going to go there, so I tried to give Devonte some love.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate it. Although my game ball is about to go to my daughter who just stepped in here. You want to come say hi? No. My game ball goes to Robert Johnson. 29 points, as we mentioned, the 4 assists, the 1 turnover. I just thought it was his most complete game as a Hoosier that I can remember. On a day when Indiana, this win wasn't going to be driven, by holding the other opponent down, and you couldn't just rely on Juwan Morgan to be his usual self. The Hoosiers really needed someone to step up, and Robert was that guy. The offense got him good looks, and he stepped up and made them. And even though it hasn't been a particularly great season from a shooting perspective for Robert, lo and behold, he's now up to 37.3% from downtown. That's better than last year. And so, sometimes you just have to be patient in conference games. He's now shooting 39.8%. That's in the top 20. Right? And that's something that we've talked about, Ryan. A guy with the track record of Robert Johnson that has played so much Big Ten basketball as him, it just didn't seem sustainable for him to keep shooting that poorly. Now, he's obviously had a couple of just tremendous shooting days that have really bumped that up. But, sometimes you're going to have days like that where you're just red hot, and Indiana really needed it today. So, 9 for 12 on a day when you win by 25, maybe not so impressive. 9 for 12 on a day when your team wins by 2 and they needed every single one of them, that's huge. And it's a big moment for a senior stepping up on the road. And I know that Robert's season has been up and down this year, But look, I mean, he just went out and delivered his signature performance, and essentially delivered this win for Indiana in a game that they really needed coming down the stretch. So huge kudos to Robert Johnson, and obviously honorable mention game balls to Freddie McSwain, to Justin Smith, and to Collin Hartman for their contributions today. But I think this was a game. A lot of Indiana's performances this year have been driven by the front court, and the backcourt has been the reason why Indiana has lost. Today, the backcourt stepped up. Robert Johnson, Devonte Green, they were the reason that Indiana won today. So really impressive by both guys.
When was the last time Juwan Morgan didn't get a game ball?
It's been a while.
Yeah,
probably Michigan State. Right? Probably the Michigan State game where he got hurt, I would imagine. I mean, and that's the thing. He's just, he's been so
automatic.
Good. Yeah, and I think that's why his performance today was notable, because it really stands out. And not just from the lack of production. Like, you might have a game where you miss some shots and you only get 12 points. He just seemed off. And so I think that's, and you kind of alluded to this, Ryan, he's a guy that so much has been asked of him, and so much has been on his shoulders. I think you do kind of worry a little bit about him running out of steam, down the stretch.
Sure. And it's understandable.
Yeah. And we have no idea if that's what happened today. I mean, you're going to have to, see him come out in the next game and then against Ohio State and see how he is. But it didn't look like him today. This was not the guy that has been the driving force behind, Indiana being, 9-7 in the conference, really. But again, to his teammates' credit, they stepped up and they carried him across the finish line when he's done that for them so many times this year.
Yeah, and to be fair to Juwan, it looked like he was engaged. It didn't look like he was just wandering through the game. But I really think that getting the early foul trouble, sitting out, then maybe some of the calls that went against him or that he didn't get, plus the early start, plus again wearing down. I think it was a lot of things. I don't think it's just one thing you can point to. I think there were a lot of things working against him in this game, and but they finished the game out. And the real key to me to see that he was off was just the rebounding. I mean, he was getting out rebounded.
Well, and the steals and blocks, because those have been so consistent too. And again, that's effort and awareness. So anyway, we know Indiana's playing Nebraska. Andy's usually the one who does the previews for these. We actually have a really good question here in the chat, Ryan, that I want to get to.
Sure.
So let me just say this as we look ahead to the Nebraska game. Nebraska they're currently 54th in KenPom. As we know, they have a really gaudy record. They haven't really beaten a whole lot of teams. They really had their Big Ten schedule lay out about as favorably as anybody. I think they had single plays against all the top 5 or 6 teams in the conference. So it was kind of
won 6 in a row too.
So, and here's the thing about Indiana, to where you got to pause the brakes a little bit, maybe on being overly enthusiastic about the 4-game win streak. Any 4-game win streak in conference play is impressive, but just to play devil's advocate, the 4 teams that Indiana has beaten, here are their rankings in KenPom: 147, 106, 112, and 100. So number one, that's a testament.
Top 300 at least.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of a testament to how bad the Big Ten is, that you can have a 4-game winning streak and not beat a top 100 team in the Big Ten. I mean, I don't know when the last time that is, but now, again, Indiana's primed itself, beating some of the worst teams in the Big Ten. Now they step up and they play 2 of the best in Nebraska and Ohio State. So a really big test for this Indiana team to see really where they're at now. But here's the question from Anthony, Ryan, and I want to get your thoughts on this. We're all pretty excited about Miller's performance this year, as we talked about. But do you guys have any honest criticism to keep it from feeling like we're inflating a bubble? And to me, there's a couple of obvious things that jump out. But what do you think?
I mean, obviously, look, they've been beating teams that aren't as great as you just pointed out, of course, dampening the whole thing. But no, I think the shooting, the free throw shooting, are definitely criticisms, the things that need to be more consistent. I think that they're, if you're going to look and point at what this team is missing, there's a lack of size, and you play a Michigan State or even a Purdue right now, it's going to be tough because they just don't have size on the inside without Deron Davis. There's plenty of holes in this team. The key is they've got to find ways to beat teams creatively, and they've done that over the last couple of weeks. And then when they played Michigan State at home, when they played Purdue at home, they played well enough to keep those games within reach, and they did it again creatively, being smarter than the other team. but yeah, I mean, we're talking about this team, and when you praise them, you're praising how far it's come, not, overall. I don't think this team is ready to be thrown into the NCAA tournament expected to make a run. I'm just, when we're talking about them, we're talking about the distance they've traveled this season, how much better they are now than they were. And then also what gets me excited, and I've mentioned this a lot, is looking forward to next year with the guys who are coming in added to the guys who are returning. I think this team is building something pretty special, especially if you land a guy like Romeo Langford, it resets all expectations. So I think that's when we're excited about this. We're excited about the growth of the program, not necessarily where this team is, ready to take on the best teams in the country or anything like that. I think we're excited about the road this team's been on and where it's gotten to.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to just judge this season on, kind of a flat standard, right? It's like the standard for Indiana is, okay, 16-12, not even being on the bubble. That's unacceptable.
No, of course. Year to year, that's completely unacceptable.
Yeah, that's totally true. But it really, like, if that's how you're going to judge this team, I don't really know why you're watching the games. I feel like that's unfair. And really, it's just kind of ridiculous given the fact that, this team lost in the first round of the NIT tournament last year, loses 3 pros, they fire the coach. Clearly something was not right. And I think seeing what Chris Holtman has done at Ohio State, I think has exacerbated some of the frustration that people might have had with the way that Indiana started. But as we've talked about many times, those situations they're comparable in some ways, but they're very different in other ways. And so,
you want a more one-to-one comparison, look at Illinois. That's the more one-to-one comparison of where these teams were and where they are. And Indiana is way further along. And a lot of people love the Brad Underwood hire too. And I think
you can see Illinois getting better. Like that's both of those programs are kind of changing styles, instituting something
that's why it's a more one-to-one comparison.
Yes. And so I think, you talk about frustrations with Archie, not being able to figure out a way to unlock better shooting. That's a criticism. And we're not there. So I don't know what to criticize specifically, but when you're the coach overseeing an Indiana team that's sub 300 in 3-point shooting and free throw shooting, I feel like the coach has to take some responsibility for that. And maybe, that may be one of those things where the responsibility is we focus 75% of our focus on defense to the detriment of our offense. And that's why. And so that is a criticism to a certain extent, but it also is part of the explanation for why the defense has gotten better. So a lot of this stuff is complicated and interwoven. And I think, it's the same thing. It's like with a guy like Devonte Green, okay, why wasn't Archie maybe able to coach Devonte Green through some of his struggles earlier in the year and unlock some of this? Well, I don't know. Maybe Devonte Green just wasn't ready. Maybe it took 2 months of holding him accountable with the bench and a quick hook to get him to this point. And there wasn't a way to accelerate that. But I think that would be the other criticism is for a guard, to have 4 guards that all have offensive efficiencies under 100. Although Robert Johnson's clearly has bumped ahead of that now. He's at 101.8 after this game. But to go through the majority of your season with 4 guards, 2 of them who are seniors with offensive efficiencies under 100, I think probably some responsibility there goes to Archie Miller as well. But again, it may be because the focus was so much on defense, and now you're playing a new system on offense. So, but those are some of the things to me that you can point out as criticisms, because everything hasn't been perfect this year. But I think on the whole, I think you agree, and I think the vast majority of IU fans agree that it's been a very positive first season for the Archie Miller experience, and getting better, as we go down the stretch here.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right, you're listening to the Assembly Call. Remember that because you are an Assembly Call listener, you get 15% off of your entire order at HoosierProud.com. So if you want officially licensed IU gear, one of our Assembly Call logo t-shirts, or one of Hoosier Proud's unique Indiana-inspired designs, visit HoosierProud.com and use the promo code ASSEMBLY at checkout. That's HoosierProud.com, promo code ASSEMBLY for 15% off your entire order. I am Jared Morris. I'm here with Ryan Phillips. And Ryan, let's wrap it up. It is time for last call. You open us up, closing statements on this Indiana victory over Iowa.
I want to remind all Indiana fans tonight that 2 Indiana guys are going in the NBA All-Star festivities. You've got Eric Gordon trying to defend his 3-point shooting title, and you've got Victor Oladipo in the dunk contest. Tune in and watch it. Root for a Hoosier. You don't have to watch the All-Star game. It's kind of a joke unless you want to watch Victor do some stuff. But the All-Star weekend stuff is always fun. So tune in, root on your fellow Hoosiers. Just basically, I basically sum up what I've said, and that's that I really thought that it showed a lot of mental toughness for Indiana to stick with this game after such a terrible start, where Iowa was just on fire, and there's really nothing you can do when a team is hitting all the shots like that. Indiana really turned it around, stepped up, battled through it, got a solid lead in the second half, looked like they were going to run away with it. Iowa caught a second win, brought it back, and Indiana was strong enough down the stretch to hold them off and make the smart, effective plays when they needed to down the stretch. And so, I mean, that's all encouraging. All of that is encouraging. And again, in a day where you don't have your best player at his best, everybody else stepping up, and congrats to Robert Johnson on the career high and tying two guys that don't exactly live on in lore in Indiana history with Roderick Wilmot and Matt Roth, guys that we remember and recognize, but long-term IU fans probably can't even pick those guys out of a lineup. He has tied them with the single game 3-point record. Hey, he's still got time to beat it. I mean, he's still got a couple games left to maybe beat it. So we'll see.
I like the way you think.
Yeah, there you go. We're going to need it down the stretch, Robert. So bottle up whatever you had today and keep it with you.
Yeah, I mean, look, final statement from today's game. Just really impressed with how Indiana was able to go on the road, take a big punch early, and come back. And to me, I thought coming out of the under 12-minute timeout, I thought Indiana had a great defensive possession. And I distinctly remember Freddie McSwain, kind of having, one of his first good defensive possessions of the game, really bodying up well. And I thought to myself, okay, it looks like we've kind of got the defense figured out. That looks like our defense. I think we're going to start playing better now. And, and lo and behold, we did. And it's fun to watch a program now, that is driven by its defense, but also be able to combine some really breathtaking offense. And at times, when you have guards who go 13 of 17 from 3-point range, like Robert and Devonte did, that makes offense fun to watch. And this offense hasn't always been fun to watch, but it sure was today. And so if you can get those guys, clicking, they probably won't click again like that all season long, but get them clicking at 75% of that level, get the Juwan Morgan that we all know and love kind of back at it and keep the defense, then this team can still do some things down the stretch. So again, we talked about how this 4-game winning streak has been driven by playing some of the worst teams in the Big Ten. Well, now we're going to get our opportunity to see where Indiana is on the road at Nebraska, at home against Ohio State. Those are going to be tough games, but they're winnable games. Indiana can win at Nebraska. They can beat Ohio State at home. And for a team that's had so many close calls this year to kind of get that real signature win, obviously Notre Dame was an impressive win, but in Big Ten conference play, to get that real signature win, these are two opportunities to get it. And so I'm excited that the Hoosiers are on this 4-game winning streak. I'm excited they were able to win in a different way today. And now we all look forward to these final 2 games. Hopefully they can win at least one of them and get some momentum heading into the Big Ten tournament. And let's see what else this team is capable of. All right, that'll do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember that our live broadcasts immediately following every IU game are always available on our homepage at assemblycall.com and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. And you can always catch up on demand anytime with our podcast. Just search for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/join to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again. When's that game against? That's Tuesday. Next Tuesday. It's a late game. So we will talk to you late after that Indiana-Nebraska game wraps. And then we will be on our way to Bloomington for the game next Friday. We really look forward to that. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.